So this is the famous palace?
This is it, David's palace.
Here's the big question. Is the time of David historical or mythological?
He unites all the 12 tribes, builds the foundation of the house of God, what will be the temple.
What if one of the most debated figures in human history was never supposed to be real? For centuries, King David was dismissed as a symbolic character, more myth than man. But a recent archaeological discovery is forcing experts to rethink that assumption. Because deep beneath Jerusalem, evidence has emerged that may point to the existence of King David's palace. And the implications are far bigger than anyone expected. The problem archaeology could not solve. For much of modern archaeology, King David was not treated as a confirmed ruler, but as a question that refused to settle. Ancient texts described him as a powerful king who ruled from Jerusalem and governed a unified kingdom. According to these texts, David ruled over multiple tribes, controlled large territories, and established Jerusalem as a political center. His authority was described as stretching across much of the Central Highlands, from the southern regions of Judah to the northern tribal lands. He was portrayed as a ruler who commanded armies, collected tribute, appointed officials, and governed through a centralized system. Yet, when archaeologists went looking for physical proof, the ground remained silent. There were no palaces that could be confidently linked to his reign, no royal complexes, no clear signs of centralized power that matched the scale described in the texts. Over time, that silence became a problem. The issue was not disbelief in ancient writing, it was evidence. Archaeology depends on material remains, such as stones, walls, building layouts, and objects left behind. For decades, excavations in Jerusalem and surrounding areas failed to produce structures that looked like royal architecture from the 10th century BCE. What researchers did find were modest remains and limited construction. Nothing clearly suggested a capital city ruling over a large and organized kingdom. According to many excavation reports, Jerusalem during this period appeared more like a small hill settlement than the seat of royal power described in ancient accounts. As these findings accumulated, scholarly confidence shifted. Many researchers began to argue that the biblical description of David had been exaggerated over time. According to this view, David may have existed, but not as a powerful monarch. Some scholars suggested he was a local leader or a tribal figure, perhaps influential in his immediate region, but not the ruler of a centralized state. This interpretation slowly gained traction because it appeared to align with what archaeology was showing and what it was failing to show. One issue stood above all others. A king who ruled a territory as large as the ancient texts described would require a palace. Not a symbolic home, but a functional seat of power, a place for administration, storage, planning, and control. Yet no structure of that kind had been clearly identified. Reports from earlier excavations repeatedly noted the absence of elite buildings from David's time. Without a palace, the idea of a strong Davidic kingdom became harder to defend. Over time, the missing palace stopped being a gap and became an argument. This shift created tension within the field. Some researchers expressed frustration. Others showed caution. A few were openly skeptical of the biblical account. Academic conferences and publications increasingly treated David as a marginal figure. According to some scholarly interpretations, the united monarchy described in ancient texts was more ideological than historical, shaped by later writers rather than reflecting early political reality. What made the situation more intense was how settled the debate began to feel. New students entering the field were often taught that David's kingdom lacked material support. The idea of a palace from his reign was treated as unlikely. In some circles, it was treated as impossible. That conclusion shaped how excavations were planned and where researchers chose to dig. Yet, This agreement carried discomfort beneath it. Some archaeologists quietly wondered whether the issue rested not with David, but with the search itself. According to accounts from within academic circles, a few researchers felt that early Judah might not expose its secrets in major cities like Jerusalem alone. They believed that meaningful clues could exist in places long overlooked, including border areas and fortified locations that did not match the traditional focus of excavation. That doubt did not stop everyone, the archaeologists who refused to abandon the question. While much of the academic world had settled into the idea that King David's kingdom was small and restricted, not everyone embraced that conclusion. Two archaeologists in particular started to ask whether the problem lay in the past or in modern assumptions. Professor Yossi Garfinkel of the Hebrew University and Sargonor of the Israel Antiquities Authority were not motivated by tradition or religious belief. According to colleagues, their approach was practical and evidence-based. They wanted to determine whether archaeology had truly explored every possibility or whether it had simply been searching in the wrong places. One question troubled them deeply. Why was early Judah almost always examined through Jerusalem alone? Jerusalem had been excavated repeatedly for more than a century. Layers had been disturbed, stones reused. Later construction had erased earlier remains. Garfinkel and Gnor began to believe that if early state-level evidence once existed there, it might no longer be visible. According to reports from the excavation community, they thought that a young kingdom might leave clearer signs at its edges rather than its center. This change in thinking pulled them away from the capital and toward border regions. Border zones are where early kingdoms often show power through fortifications and planning. These areas face danger. They demand control. They reveal whether a society can organize labor and resources under pressure. Garfinkel and Ganner started reviewing data from fortified sites dating to the early Iron Age. That is when one location kept appearing: Khirbet Qeiyafa. Khirbet Qeiyafa was not well known. It did not show up in popular history books. It rested on a rocky hill overlooking the Ela Valley, far from major cities and modern roads. According to local accounts, the site had long been overlooked because it appeared remote and hard to reach. Earlier surveys had recorded stone remains, but nothing that attracted serious interest. To many, it seemed like just another ruined hilltop. But when Garfinkel and Gunor examined it more closely, they noticed patterns that did not match that belief. Early survey data pointed to unusually thick walls and organized layouts. The scales suggested planning rather than natural growth. According to preliminary reports, the site seemed to have been constructed quickly and intentionally, not gradually over generations. That sparked concern and curiosity at the same time. The more they analyzed the site, the more certain they became that it could not be ignored. Some archaeologists reportedly cautioned them against overreading early indicators. Others doubted whether committing resources there was worth the risk. At that time, connecting any archaeological site to King David was viewed as academically dangerous. For decades, scholars who made strong claims about David's kingdom faced heavy criticism. Some had their interpretations openly challenged in journals and conferences. Others saw their work dismissed as ideologically driven rather than evidence-based. According to reports within the field, earlier claims tied to David had sparked long arguments, harmed professional reputations, and led to accusations of forcing archaeology to match ancient texts. Younger researchers, especially, were often warned to avoid the topic entirely if they wanted secure academic careers. Still, Garfinkel and Gnor pressed on. They suspected that Khirbet Qeiyafa played a role in early state formation. Not a random village, not a temporary camp, but a site linked to authority and control. According to some interpretations, its position above a major valley suggested strategic purpose. Whoever built it wanted visibility and command. That alone warranted closer investigation. Expanding the excavation was not an easy choice. It demanded funding, permits, and academic support. There was no promise the site would yield anything beyond walls and debris. According to unverified reports from those involved, there was real tension heading into the dig. Still, they moved forward, and once full excavation began, the site quickly started revealing results that did not fit accepted models. The first physical signs something was wrong. As excavation at Khirbet Qeiyafa moved beyond surface work, the first indications of trouble for the accepted model began to emerge. What initially surfaced were stone walls. At first, walls alone were not unusual, but as more appeared, concern spread among the team. These were not thin barriers or simple enclosures. According to excavation reports, the walls were enormous, thick, and carefully built. They were far larger than what archaeologists expected from a supposedly weak and undeveloped society of the 10th century BCE. As the excavation widened, another detail became impossible to overlook. The city was not disorderly. Streets and structures followed a clear and intentional design. Buildings were aligned with purpose. Space had been planned ahead of time. This was not a settlement that had developed slowly over generations. According to some interpretations, it seemed to have been planned and built within a short span following a single blueprint. That level of coordination raised immediate questions about who possessed the authority to organize such an effort. Then came the gates. Excavators uncovered not one, but two monumental gates built directly into the fortifications. This instantly caused discomfort. Most fortified cities from this era had a single gate for control and defense. Two gates demanded more resources, more labor, and more supervision. According to reports from the site, the size and engineering of these gates suggested significance beyond local needs. The discovery gained added weight when scholars noticed a link to ancient texts. The biblical name Sharayim means two gates. Some researchers cautiously suggested the match might be coincidental. Others felt it was too precise to dismiss. According to unverified discussions within academic circles, this was the moment when the site stopped being merely unusual and started becoming unsettling. Location only intensified the issue. Khirbet Qeiyafa stood above the valley, a major route connecting the coastal plains to the central highlands. This valley was not isolated. It was contested terrain. According to historical reconstructions, control of this area would have been vital for any emerging kingdom. A fortified city overlooking it pointed to strategy, not isolation. Whoever built this place cared deeply about visibility, movement, and defense. Scientific testing followed. Carbon dating was conducted on olive pits and other organic materials found sealed beneath the walls. The results firmly placed the construction in the 10th century BCE. This timing was crucial. It aligned directly with the period traditionally linked to King David. According to excavation data, the dating left little room to shift the site earlier or later without straining the evidence. At this stage, explanations began to falter. This was not a seasonal camp. It was not a small rural village. The scale, planning, location, and dating all pointed toward something more structured. Some scholars reportedly began asking difficult questions in private. If Judah truly lacked centralized power at this time, how could a site like this exist at all? Still, skepticism lingered. Defensive walls could be explained as military necessity. A frontier outpost might justify strong fortifications. Some argued it was an isolated reaction to conflict rather than proof of a kingdom. These explanations bought time, but they did not restore confidence. According to reports from the excavation team, the feeling was growing that the old model was weakening. The turning point came from what was uncovered inside the city itself. early signs of central authority. As excavation continued at Khirbet Qeiyafa, focus moved away from the walls and toward what existed inside the city. Near the highest point of the settlement, archaeologists uncovered large buildings unlike anything previously found at the site. These structures were not hidden along the edges or squeezed into tight spaces. They occupied dominant positions visible from much of the city below. According to excavation reports, this placement was deliberate. In ancient settlements, the most important buildings were often positioned at the highest and most visible locations. As excavation went on, nearby areas of the site revealed another kind of evidence. Archaeologists began uncovering designated storage spaces filled with large jars, not just a few containers, but hundreds of them. According to reports from the site, the quantity immediately raised alarm. This level of storage far exceeded what a single household or even a small community would need. The jars were similar in size and shape, suggesting they were produced consistently rather than crafted individually for family use. Closer inspection made the situation more striking. Many of the jars bore seal impressions on their handles. These marks were not decorative. According to specialists, such seals were used to signal official control. They indicated that goods had been collected, recorded, and managed under authority. Some believe these seals served as early administrative tools, allowing officials to track resources moving through the region. According to unverified interpretations, this kind of system appears only when power is centralized. The scale of storage reshaped how the site was understood. This was not surplus kept only for survival. It suggested collection from surrounding areas. According to some researchers, this pointed toward taxation. Food and goods were being gathered, stored, and redistributed. Such a process does not function on its own. It requires coordination, planning, and oversight. Someone had to decide what was collected, where it was stored, and how it was used. That level of organization suggested authority beyond the local level. Still, the evidence fell short of certainty. Storage systems and seals pointed toward central control, but they did not name a king. According to cautious voices in the field, these features could belong to a regional authority rather than a royal court. Others argued that a military administration might account for the findings. These explanations kept the debate alive. The site appeared organized, powerful, and controlled, yet its highest authority remained unresolved. Reports from conferences suggest reactions ranged from surprise to frustration. Some challenged the interpretations, others warned against drawing conclusions too quickly. The excavation team reportedly felt growing pressure as each discovery drew scrutiny and debate within the field. Tension continued to rise steadily among scholars. As these findings were published, acceptance did not follow. Instead, resistance grew stronger. The evidence scholars tried to explain away. As discoveries from Khirbet Qeiyafa started spreading, the response was not acceptance. It was resistance. Based on accounts from academic gatherings and peer evaluations, many scholars acted quickly to dispute the implications of the site. The evidence existed, but its interpretation was intensely argued. The consequences were obvious. If these readings proved correct, long-held beliefs about early Judah would unravel. One of the earliest challenges centered on geography. Detractors claimed that Khirbet Qeiyafa lay too distant from Jerusalem to relate to a Davidic kingdom. Under this argument, a royal hub could not operate beyond the capital. Some proposed that even if the location mattered, it could not signify centralized power connected to David. Others responded that early states often built fortresses along frontier zones, but the debate slowed acceptance. Another stream of critique questioned identity. Certain scholars argued the site could belong to an entirely different people. According to these views, The defenses and design might indicate Philistine or Canaanite presence rather than Judahite rule. These assertions were argued fiercely. Based on informal discussions, pottery forms, food remains, and building techniques became points of conflict, with each camp attempting to distance the site from David's sphere. Others sought to minimize the site's significance by redefining its function. A frequent claim suggested that Khirbet Qeiyafa served as a short-term military station. Under this theory, the massive walls and storage facilities supported only temporary protection. This let critics dismiss organization and size without admitting state-level structure. Advocates of the dig maintained that the design and durability of the buildings argued otherwise, yet the dispute stayed unsettled. Chronology became another disputed issue. Even though carbon analysis dated the site to the 10th century BCE, some scholars suggested alternate chronologies. According to reports, efforts were made to shift construction slightly earlier or later, just enough to avoid direct association with David. These claims emphasized error ranges instead of fresh evidence, but they created doubt and postponed agreement. Even terminology came under dispute. The term palace sparked immediate resistance. Critics insisted the word suggested conclusions not yet demonstrated. According to certain replies, they favored neutral terms like large building or administrative complex. Meanwhile, the administrative scale shown by storage jars and seal marks was minimized. Some argued it reflected local authority rather than royal oversight. Each reworking weakened the implications without rejecting the material evidence itself. As objections grew, pressure on the excavation team intensified. Based on internal field accounts, Garfinkel and Gnor encountered constant challenges to their approach and interpretations. Their conclusions were examined word by word. Public arguments became strained. Responses ranged from skepticism to outright irritation. For some academics, the site endangered years of research and established frameworks.